When I first met Ethan, I thought the universe had finally stopped playing games with me. He was everything I'd secretly scribbled in notebooks as a teenager, tall, kind-eyed, funny, in that quiet, observant way that made me feel like I was the only one in the room he truly saw. We met at a bookstore downtown. I dropped a coffee on his shoes, and instead of getting mad, he smiled and said, "Well, that's one way to start a love story. It sounds ridiculous now, almost too perfectly staged. But at the time, it felt real, effortless, like fate had finally decided to get it right. We moved fast, the kind of fast that makes people whisper behind your back. 3 months after we met, he asked me to marry him on a misty hillside outside the city. There were no rings, no photographers, just a quiet promise under a gray sky that somehow felt more binding than anything official. We got married in a courthouse the following week. No guests. Just the two of us and a pair of witnesses I barely remember. I didn't care. I was in love or something that looked a lot like it. Our life together was quiet and warm. We lived in a modest apartment filled with thrifted furniture and half-finished jigsaw puzzles. He brought me coffee in bed. He listened to my endless stories from work, even the ones I knew were boring. We laughed, we cooked, we danced barefoot in the kitchen on rainy nights. I felt safe, like I'd finally found the home I never quite had growing up. And for a while, that was enough. But now, when I look back, I see it. The little cracks, the details he brushed over, the way he never talked about his childhood in depth, just vague stories about moving a lot. Parents who weren't around much. I never saw childhood photos. Never met a single friend from his past. He said they'd all drifted apart. Said his parents were private people, reclusive, living off-grid in a remote town he never named. At the time, I believed him. I loved him too much not to. Or maybe I was afraid to tug at a thread that might unravel everything. So I let the questions stay questions, until I couldn't anymore. It had been nearly a year and a half since we said our rushed vows in that courthouse. And still, I hadn't met a single person from Ethan's family. Not a mother, a father, a cousin. No holidays, no phone calls, not even a Christmas card. At first, I didn't push. I told myself I was being respectful. He always said his family was complicated, that they lived in a small town hours away, that their lives were simple and private. I believed it, because I wanted to. But the longer it went on, the more it started to feel less like privacy and more like hiding. I brought it up one Sunday morning, when the sunlight filtered lazily through our living room windows and the smell of pancakes filled the air. He was standing at the stove, humming to himself, and I remember thinking, this is the moment. This is when I ask. "Ethan," I said gently, folding my hands in my lap, "I'd really like to meet your family." He stopped humming, just for a second. A subtle pause that might have meant nothing to someone else. But I noticed. Then he smiled, the way he always did when he was trying to keep something from me. "Why?" he asked lightly. "They're boring," I laughed, but my voice was too tight. "I've been your wife for over a year. I think it's time." He flipped the pancake with a little too much force. "It's not that simple. My mom's not well, and my dad doesn't really like visitors." Another pause. "And my brother. We don't talk anymore." The words sat between us like a fog that wouldn't clear. I looked at him carefully. "Just one weekend. That's all I'm asking." He exhaled slowly and nodded, but it didn't feel like agreement. It felt like surrender. "Okay, I'll figure something out, but don't expect a warm welcome. My family's different." He kissed my forehead and smiled, but I noticed how his eyes didn't quite match the expression. And in that moment, a thought passed through me, sharp and fleeting like a paper cut. What if I wasn't the only one who thought we were married? But I let it go. I wanted so badly to believe I was finally getting closer to the missing pieces. What I didn't know was that I wasn't walking into his past. I was walking into a lie. The morning we left, I packed too many snacks and wore a sweater I wasn't sure I liked. I must have changed 3 times before settling on something neutral, something his mother wouldn't judge, if she was the judging type. I'd never made a good first impression on anyone's family before, but this time I wanted to. I needed to. I told myself this weekend would fill in all the blanks that had quietly collected in the corners of my marriage like dust no one dared sweep away. Ethan loaded the car with practiced ease, like he'd done it 100 times before. He kissed my cheek, called me his brave little road warrior, and promised me it would be harmless and quick. That last part stuck with me. Not fun or meaningful, just harmless. We drove for hours. The city fell behind us, swallowed by open roads and rolling hills that looked like they belonged in another decade. I watched him drive, hands steady on the wheel, eyes fixed forward. I talked too much about random things, funny memories, work, gossip, but he wasn't really listening. He smiled in the right places, laughed when he should have, but his silence stretched wider than usual. "Everything okay?" I asked when we hit a long patch of farmland, and he hadn't spoken in over 20 minutes. "Yeah," he said too quickly. "Just thinking about some deadlines. Work's been piling up." He always said that, even when I knew work wasn't the real thing weighing on him. "Do you get nervous seeing your family?" I asked. He hesitated. "Not really. They're just complicated." I nodded, trying to respect his boundaries, even as they started to feel like walls. Outside the window, the trees grew taller, older, like they'd been watching for decades. I imagined they knew all of Ethan's truths already. I stared out, fingers curled in my lap, pretending not to feel the knot growing low in my stomach. We passed the town's welcome sign just after dusk, a wooden plank painted in fading white letters. "Welcome to Linden Creek. Population 2,108. Ethan didn't react. No smile, no nostalgia. Just a slight tightening of his jaw. I looked at him, wanting to ask something, anything, but all I said was, "It's beautiful." He nodded. "It's quiet." And I swear, in that quiet, something inside me whispered, "This isn't going to go how you think it will." The sky had already darkened by the time we pulled off the main road and turned onto a narrow gravel driveway that led not to his family's house, but to a motel nestled between two giant oak trees. I stared at the peeling paint and flickering vacancy sign, confused. Ethan parked without a word. "This isn't your parents' place," I said, my voice lighter than I felt. He didn't look at me right away. "I figured we'd rest here tonight," he said. "It's been a long drive, but we're already in town, right?" He nodded, then unbuckled his seatbelt slowly. "My mom's not feeling well. She texted while we were on the road, said she needs to rest tonight, didn't want visitors." He said it so casually, like this was all normal, like it made sense that we'd come all this way only to stop a mile short of what we'd planned for. I swallowed my disappointment. "Is she okay? She gets migraines," he said. "They knock her out for a day or two." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something about the way he avoided my eyes made my chest tighten. The motel room smelled faintly of old linen and pine-scented cleaner. It wasn't terrible, just impersonal, like a place no one stayed in long enough to leave a trace. Ethan dropped our bags and sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing the back of his neck like he was trying to press down something that was rising inside him. "You're being quiet," I said softly, sitting beside him. He looked at me then, really looked. "It's just, I haven't been home in a while. There's a lot of history here, not all of it good." I nodded. I didn't press. I wrapped my arms around his, rested my head on his shoulder, and told myself tomorrow would be different. That the door would open, and I'd be welcomed in, like family. That Ethan's past, however messy, would finally be something we could share. I didn't know then that we'd already reached the closest I'd ever get to the truth, and that behind the front doors I was so desperate to walk through. I wasn't expected, because according to them, he didn't have a wife. The next morning, the motel coffee tasted like cardboard, and the eggs came out of a plastic bag, but I was too restless to care. Ethan said his mom was still under the weather, and probably wouldn't be up for visitors, which sounded reasonable, but the way he said it made me feel like I'd already been quietly uninvited. He scrolled through his phone like he was trying to avoid the conversation entirely, then suggested we go into town for a bit, before heading to the house. Linden Creek was charming in that small-town way that makes you wonder if you're in a movie or just someone else's memory. Brick storefronts, a diner with a handwritten chalkboard sign, a bookstore that looked like it hadn't changed since the 60 seconds. But it was more than just picturesque, it felt familiar. At least to Ethan. He didn't smile, but his eyes scanned everything like they were measuring something, like he was waiting to see if anything had changed or if the town had kept all his secrets intact. We stopped at a local cafe with chipped mugs and floral tablecloths. I was mid-sip when a woman in her 50s walked past, paused, then slowly turned around. "Oh my God," she said, eyes narrowing. "You're back." Ethan's posture stiffened. She didn't wait for an answer. "I almost didn't recognize you. Your hair's longer now." He gave a tense smile. "Good to see you, Miss Hargrove." "Miss Hargrove," she repeated with a laugh. "You always were so polite, Daniel." "Daniel?" The name hit me like a pin to the chest. I looked at Ethan. He didn't even flinch. "I go by Ethan now," he said, quick and smooth, like it was a joke he'd told before. "Just a thing I started after college." "Oh," she said slowly, clearly unsure what to make of it. "Well, it's good to see you again. Your mama must be thrilled." She nodded at me politely, then walked off. I waited for an explanation, anything. But Ethan just sipped his coffee and looked out the window. "You didn't tell me you had a different name." He didn't look at me. "It's not a big deal." But it was. I just didn't know how big yet. That evening, we went to a quiet restaurant at the edge of town. More his idea than mine. He said it was something to do, but I knew he was trying to stall. Another excuse. Another delay. The house, the family, still off limits. The place was cozy and dimly lit, all dark wood and soft lighting. We sat in a corner booth, and I tried to act normal. I asked about his favorite childhood spots, old friends, but every question I asked seemed to land just a little too hard. He kept answering in half sentences, as if the full truth was too heavy to carry across the table. The food came and we barely touched it. Halfway through the meal, his phone lit up. He glanced at it and froze, just for a split second. But I caught it. Then he stood up abruptly. "I've got to take this. It's work." He was gone before I could say anything. I sat alone at the table, the candle flickering between us like it was waiting for someone to blow it out. He'd taken his jacket, his wallet, his keys. "Just a phone call," he said. But something about the way he moved felt wrong. Not rushed, calculated. I waited 5 minutes. 10. Then I stood and walked to the entrance. I didn't see him outside. I looked around the parking lot. Nothing. When he came back 15 minutes later, he looked calm. Too calm. "Sorry," he said, sliding back into the booth. "That was my boss. He's freaking out about deadlines." I stared at him. "You took your jacket for a phone call?" "It's cold," he said quickly. "Did you miss me that much?" I smiled, but something inside me twisted. The first sharp tug of a thread I hadn't meant to pull. We finished dinner in silence. He paid in cash. Later that night, while he was in the shower, I checked his phone. Locked. New passcode. Something he'd changed without telling me. I stood in the motel bathroom, brushing my teeth, watching him towel off in the mirror, and for the first time since we got married, I felt like I was sleeping beside a stranger. A charming, secret-keeping stranger who maybe wasn't mine to begin with. It was late afternoon by the time Ethan finally said, "Let's go." No explanation, no build-up, just that. I didn't ask questions. I was too busy rehearsing polite smiles and hoping my nerves wouldn't show through the light sweater I'd changed into twice. The town blurred past the car windows again, but this time the silence between us felt heavier, tighter, as if whatever was coming next needed space to breathe. The house was on the outskirts of town, tucked behind a row of tall sycamores and an iron gate that creaked when it opened. It was beautiful, in a haunting kind of way. Large, pale brick with black shutters and a wide wraparound porch. Ivy curled around the columns like it had lived there longer than anyone else. It looked like a house you inherited, not one you bought. The kind that held memories whether you wanted them or not. Ethan pulled into the gravel driveway and cut the engine. For a moment, he didn't move. Just stared at the house like it might dissolve if he blinked. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, but his voice was flat. "Just haven't been back in a while." We walked up the steps, and he knocked lightly on the heavy front door before pushing it open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lilac and lemon polish. It was spotless. Warm light spilled from antique fixtures, and the hardwood floors creaked softly beneath our feet. Everything looked carefully preserved, like time had passed, but nothing had been allowed to change. "May?" Ethan called out. A moment later, a woman appeared from around the corner. Late 60s, maybe older. Silver hair pinned up, soft cardigan draped over her shoulders, eyes sharp despite her gentle smile. "Well?" she said, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Look who finally showed up." Ethan gave a tight smile. "Aunt May, this is Claire." I stepped forward, hand outstretched. "It's so nice to meet you." She looked at me longer than necessary, then took my hand lightly. "You too." We weren't sure Ethan would ever bring someone home. Her tone was kind, but something in her eyes was measuring me, like she was waiting to decide if I deserved to be there at all. And suddenly, I wasn't sure I did. We sat in the parlor, a room straight out of a period drama. Ornate wallpaper, old photographs in gold frames, and heavy velvet curtains that kept the light from getting too familiar. I perched on the edge of a fainting couch, unsure where to put my hands. Aunt May offered us tea, and Ethan accepted like it was a script he'd rehearsed before. "I was hoping to meet your parents," I said, after a few polite exchanges. Ethan didn't flinch. "They're away for the week, visiting friends in Maine." "In Maine?" I repeated, forcing a smile. "What are the odds?" He just shrugged. "They planned it months ago." "And your brother?" "Moved to Colorado," he said, without elaboration. "A few years back. We don't talk much." I nodded, pretending that answered everything. But it didn't. Not really. And what made it worse was that no one else in the room seemed to think it odd. After tea, Aunt May excused herself to check on something in the kitchen, and I wandered toward a side table lined with framed photos, smiling faces, graduation caps. A couple in wedding attire I assumed were Ethan's parents. A boy blonde, freckled, gap-toothed grinning in a baseball uniform. A teenage girl holding a violin. But no Ethan. Not even in the background. I picked up one of the pictures, hoping I'd missed him somehow. Maybe he looked different as a child, but every face was unfamiliar. Every name on the back was carefully labeled, and none of them matched my husband. I turned to Ethan, still seated, scrolling through his phone like he wasn't aware of the cold air creeping in. "There aren't any photos of you." He didn't look up. "I wasn't around much. Boarding school, summer programs. I was always the one behind the camera." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But it felt too clean, too rehearsed. "Did you grow up here?" "For a while," he said. "It's complicated." He said that word a lot lately, complicated, like it was a key that could unlock any locked door. But this house was full of closed rooms and blank spaces. And I was starting to wonder if I'd been invited to meet a family that didn't exist at all. Later that afternoon, while Ethan and Aunt May were talking quietly in the kitchen, I wandered again. The house had that kind of silence that didn't just fill the air, it pressed against your skin. Every floorboard creak sounded like it wanted to tell a secret. On a small shelf near the fireplace, I found a stack of photo albums bound in worn leather, their edges frayed from years of use. It felt wrong to open them. But something stronger than guilt made my fingers move anyway. The first album was filled with sepia-toned photos, people I didn't know, smiles that belonged to another century. The next one was more recent. Birthdays, Christmas gatherings, family picnics. There was the same couple I'd seen earlier, Ethan's parents. A man with proud eyes. A woman with the kind of smile that always looked like it was meant for the camera. Children too, a boy and girl who grew up across the pages, their faces maturing year by year. And then, halfway through the album, I saw him, Ethan, standing at the edge of a group photo. He looked younger, maybe mid-20s. His hair shorter, his expression softer. His arm rested casually on the shoulder of the man I assumed was his father. For a second, relief flooded me proof. He was in the photos. He belonged here. But then I looked closer. Beneath the picture, written in neat cursive ink, Summer 2014, family barbecue with Daniel Will's family friend. Family friend. I stared at the words until the letters blurred. Daniel Wills. Not Ethan. Not the name on our marriage certificate. I flipped through the rest of the album, hands trembling. He appeared in 3 more photos, always on the sidelines, never labeled as part of the family. Each caption used the same name. Daniel. My stomach knotted. The air felt heavier. I closed the album quickly, my pulse hammering in my ears, and slid it back into place just as I heard footsteps approaching. Ethan walked in, holding 2 glasses of wine. "You okay?" he asked lightly. "Fine," I said, my voice barely steady. He smiled. "Good, dinner's ready." And as I followed him toward the dining room, one thought looped over and over in my mind. Who exactly did I marry? Dinner that night felt like stepping into a play where everyone else already knew their lines. The table was perfectly set, white china, flickering candles, the faint smell of rosemary chicken filling the air. Aunt May sat at the head of the table, graceful and poised, while Ethan and I faced each other across the polished wood. At first, it was polite chatter. Weather, travel, recipes. I smiled when I was supposed to, laughed at things I didn't find funny. Ethan looked like a man trying too hard to appear comfortable, reaching for his glass every few minutes like it could save him. "So," Aunt May said suddenly, cutting a piece of bread with delicate precision, "how did you two meet?" Ethan answered before I could. "Through work. She was designing something for a client I knew." "Ah," Aunt May said, her eyes flicking toward me. "And what do you do, dear?" "I'm a graphic designer," I said softly. "Freelance, mostly." "How lovely," she replied, her voice light but her gaze sharp. "You must be very patient to manage that kind of chaos." I smiled. "You get used to it." The rest of the meal passed in an odd rhythm, periods of silence, followed by bursts of small talk that felt rehearsed. I noticed how Aunt May kept studying Ethan, like she was watching him perform a role he hadn't played in years. Halfway through dessert, she set her fork down gently and said, almost to herself, "He hasn't brought a girl home since high school." The words hung in the air like smoke. Ethan froze, then forced a small laugh. "It's been a long time, May." She looked at him, really looked. "Yes, it has." I tried to smile, but my throat had tightened. High school. So all those stories he told me about bringing past girlfriends here, about family dinners and holiday parties, they were lies. Every single one. Aunt May excused herself soon after to make tea, and the silence that followed was unbearable. Ethan kept his eyes on his plate, jaw tight. When he finally looked up, his smile was careful, practiced. Don't read too much into what she said. She forgets things sometimes. But I didn't believe him. Not anymore, because I'd seen the way Aunt May had looked at him like she was staring at a ghost that didn't belong at her table. And for the first time, I started to wonder if Ethan ever truly belonged anywhere at all. Ethan left early the next morning, saying he needed to clear his head. He didn't explain where he was going, and I didn't ask. I just watched him drive off from the upstairs window, one hand on the glass, the other wrapped around a coffee mug I hadn't sipped from. Aunt May had gone into town too. Something about picking up fresh bread. The house felt unusually still, like it had exhaled the moment they both stepped out. I wandered the halls alone, drawn by something I couldn't name. It wasn't curiosity, not exactly. It was need. A quiet hunger for answers that had been growing louder since the moment we arrived. I told myself I wasn't snooping, I was just looking. Most of the doors were open. Neatly kept bedrooms with floral quilts and polished dressers. Guest rooms that smelled faintly of mothballs and lemon oil. The walls were lined with family portraits, none of them featuring Ethan. And then I found the door, at the end of the hallway. Plain, white, closed. I reached for the knob without thinking, as if I were being pulled. But the second my fingers turned it, I knew. Locked. Not stuck, not swollen from years of humidity. Locked. I jiggled the handle, pressed my ear against the wood. Silence. No ticking clocks, no soft hum of appliances. Just stillness. Heavy. Watching. I stepped back, my heart suddenly loud in my chest. Why was this room locked when all the others were open like open arms? I glanced down the hallway like someone might catch me, though I was completely alone. Then I tried again, more slowly this time, twisting the knob, pressing softly at the frame. It didn't budge. Ethan had never mentioned a locked room, never told me what was behind it, never said there was anywhere off limits in this house. And yet here it was, a door not meant for me. I stood there for a long moment before walking away, my footsteps suddenly too loud on the old floorboards. But something had shifted. I couldn't stop thinking about it. What kind of man brings his wife to a home where one room stays locked and never tells her why? That night, I lay in bed, scrolling through my phone, eyes unfocused, the way you do when you're trying not to think too hard. Ethan had returned late, his shirt wrinkled and mood unreadable. He said he'd gone for a drive, needed time to reset. I didn't argue. I just nodded and said I was tired. Now he was in the shower, humming faintly behind the bathroom door, like nothing in the world was wrong. I opened Instagram to distract myself, cat videos, food reels, travel blogs. Anything to pull me out of the growing pit in my stomach. That's when I saw it. A new message request. From a name I didn't recognize. Marissa Grant. I hesitated before opening it. Then I did. Hi. I'm sorry to bother you. I don't know if this is a mistake, but I saw your picture with Ethan, and I think we need to talk. My heart thudded once hard. She'd attached a screenshot, my profile, a photo from 3 months ago, me and Ethan at the lake, his arm around my waist, smiling at the camera like the world was exactly how it should be. Then another message. I've been engaged to him for almost a year. He told me he wasn't seeing anyone else. I read the words twice. 3 times. They didn't change. My throat closed. I sat up in bed slowly, like movement might change reality. I looked toward the bathroom door, still closed, steam slipping out from the cracks. She sent another message. His name's Daniel, Daniel Wills. I didn't know he was using another name, Daniel. There it was again. That name that had been clinging to the back of my mind like a shadow ever since Miss Hargrove said it. I stared at the screen, heart racing, mouth dry. I just thought you deserved to know, she wrote. I'm sorry. I really am. The message ended there. The shower turned off. I dropped my phone onto the nightstand and lay back down, eyes wide open in the dark. Ethan emerged from the bathroom moments later, towel around his waist, smiling softly like nothing had changed. Still awake? He asked. I smiled back. Yeah, just couldn't sleep. And as he slipped into bed beside me, I whispered one thing silently to myself. You're not the only one who lies, Ethan. Not anymore. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Every time I closed my eyes, Marissa's messages replayed behind them like a loop I couldn't turn off. Her words burned. I've been engaged to him for almost a year. Engaged. While I'd been calling him my husband, she'd been planning a wedding. Ethan had fallen asleep beside me, his breathing steady and shallow. I lay there, pretending to match his rhythm, until his breaths deepened into snores. Then I slipped quietly out of bed and wandered into the dim hallway. The house was silent, except for the hum of an old clock somewhere downstairs, ticking like it was counting down to something. That's when I heard voices, faint, muffled, coming from below. I moved closer to the staircase, barefoot, careful not to let the floorboards betray me. The voices grew clearer. Ethan's, sharp and low, and Aunt May's, trembling but firm. You said she wouldn't be here long, Aunt May hissed. This isn't fair to her, Daniel. My breath caught. Daniel. Not Ethan. I'm handling it, he said. Just keep calm. She's going to find out, May whispered, her voice cracking. They always do. There was a pause, the kind that feels like the air itself stops moving. Then Ethan's voice quiet, controlled. Not this time. Not this time. The words hit like ice water. How many times had there been before me? I pressed a hand against the wall to steady myself, my heart pounding. Their voices faded after that, replaced by the sound of a chair scraping against the floor and footsteps heading toward the stairs. I rushed back into the bedroom, crawled into bed, and forced my breathing to slow just as the door creaked open. Ethan peeked in. You awake? I kept my eyes closed. A long silence. Then the door shut softly again. My body trembled under the sheets, every nerve buzzing with the truth I wasn't supposed to hear. The man sleeping beside me wasn't Ethan, and the woman downstairs wasn't just an aunt. She was a witness, maybe even an accomplice. And now I knew for certain this wasn't about family anymore. This was about control. The next morning, I didn't pretend anymore. The air felt heavier, charged. Ethan moved around the room as if nothing had happened, whistling under his breath while he folded his clothes. The sight of him doing something so ordinary made me want to scream. When he turned toward the mirror, I spoke. "Who's Daniel?" The question hung in the air like a blade. He froze mid-motion, his reflection stilling before his body did. Slowly, he turned to face me. "What? Don't do that," I said quietly. "Don't act like you didn't hear me." His eyes flicked toward the window, then back to me. "Where did you hear that?" "I heard you," I said. "Last night, you and May, she called you Daniel." He sighed and sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his face with both hands. "It's complicated." There it was again. That word he used whenever he needed to build a wall. "Try me," I said. He stayed silent for a long time before finally looking up. His eyes glistened, whether from guilt or performance, I couldn't tell. "Ethan is my middle name. I started using it after I left home. My family, May included, are toxic, controlling. You don't understand what it was like growing up here." I folded my arms. "So you changed your name, lied about your past, and introduced me to everyone under a fake identity because you were protecting me?" "Yes," he said quickly. "I didn't want them dragging you into their drama. You've seen how May is manipulative, intrusive. I was trying to keep you safe." "Safe from what?" I asked, voice rising. "Your aunt or the truth?" He stood abruptly, pacing. "You're twisting this. You don't know them like I do. They'll do anything to destroy what we have." "What we have?" I laughed, hollow and sharp. "Do we even have a name for it? Because according to at least one woman, I'm not your wife, I'm your replacement." His head snapped up, eyes dark. "What woman?" I stared at him, letting the silence answer for me. His jaw clenched, and for a second, I saw something raw flicker across his face. Fear, maybe? Or the realization that his lies were running out of road. He reached for my hand, voice low and trembling. "Please, Claire, I can explain everything. I just need time." But time was exactly what he'd already taken. And I wasn't planning to give him any more. That night, I waited until the clock struck midnight. The house was asleep silent except for the wind whispering against the old window panes. I lay still, watching the faint moonlight spill across the floorboards, counting Ethan's breaths beside me. When they slowed, I slipped quietly out of bed. I didn't bother turning on the lights. The floor creaked with every cautious step as I made my way down the hall toward the locked door. My palms were slick with sweat, and my heart beat so hard I was certain it would wake him. In the drawer of the hallway console, I'd noticed an old set of keys earlier that day, rusted, unlabeled. I'd slipped them into my pocket before dinner, pretending I was looking for a napkin. Now, I knelt in front of the locked door and tried the first key. It didn't fit. The second scraped, but wouldn't turn. The third clicked. The door creaked open an inch, releasing a breath of cold, stale air that smelled faintly of dust and old paper. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was dim, lit only by the moonlight filtering through a half-closed curtain. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with boxes, old photo frames, and yellowed folders. In the corner stood a wooden desk covered with papers, bills, handwritten letters, and a single open binder labeled Family Records. I moved closer, scanning the pages. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, property deeds. My eyes caught on one name, repeated again and again, Daniel Wills. My breath caught. Then I saw the photos scattered beside the documents. Ethan, no, Daniel, standing in front of this very house. Younger but unmistakable. In one, he was wearing a suit, arm around a woman in a white dress. Her smile was radiant. His hand rested over hers tenderly. The caption written on the back, Daniel and Emily, June 2018. A wedding photo. My knees went weak. I sank onto the chair, staring at the faces frozen in time. The same man who'd promised me forever had already made that promise before to someone else. I stuffed the photos into my pocket and stepped back, every instinct screaming to get out. When I turned to leave, I caught sight of another frame on the shelf. A family portrait. Aunt May, the same woman from downstairs standing beside Daniel and the bride, smiling like she approved. My throat tightened. That's when I heard footsteps creaking in the hallway. Slow. Heavy. I killed the light, slipped through the door, and locked it behind me, forcing my heartbeat to stay silent. When I crept back into bed minutes later, Ethan shifted beside me, murmuring in his sleep. "Emily," he whispered. The name echoed in the dark like a confession. I didn't sleep after that. I couldn't. My mind kept replaying the photos, the documents, the name. Daniel Wills. The truth was sitting right there on paper, but I needed to see it for myself, to see who he really was when no one was watching. At dawn, I slipped out of bed, pretending to grab coffee. Ethan was still asleep, turned away from me. I took my laptop from my bag and sat by the window, the soft light of morning creeping across the room. My fingers trembled as I typed his real name into the search bar. Daniel Wills, Linden Creek. The results appeared instantly. A local newspaper article from 5 years ago. Local couple celebrates intimate garden wedding. There he was, Ethan, smiling beside the same woman from the photo. Emily? The caption read, "Attorney Daniel Wills and elementary school teacher Emily Carter tie the knot in a private ceremony at the Wills family estate." I scrolled further, nausea rising. A social media account popped up next. Public. Daniel Wills. His profile picture was the same face that slept inches away from me now. Same smile, same eyes. Except here, he wasn't Ethan the mysterious husband. He was Daniel the successful lawyer. Relationship status, single. The account was active. Posts from just weeks ago. A photo of him at a conference. Another of him hiking with friends. Dozens of comments from people calling him Dan. But no trace of me. No wedding photos. No mentions. Nothing. It was like I didn't exist. I clicked through tagged photos and found one from last summer, him at a restaurant, arm around a brunette woman who looked eerily like the one who'd messaged me. Marissa. The caption, "Dinner with my favorite person." My stomach turned. I closed the laptop, my reflection staring back in the black screen, pale, hollow-eyed, shaking. Behind me, I heard the bedsheets rustle. "Can't sleep?" Ethan's voice was soft, drowsy. I turned, forcing a smile that felt like glass about to shatter. "Just checking emails." He nodded, half asleep, and pulled the blanket over his shoulder. Within seconds, he was out again, breathing evenly. I sat there, staring at him, realizing that the man beside me, the one who called himself Ethan, wasn't just lying to me. He was lying to everyone. And I'd just become the newest chapter in a story he'd already written too many times before. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Not after seeing the photos. Not after watching the man I called my husband sleep so peacefully beside a lie. I needed the truth, not just documents and screenshots, but words from someone who'd lived through this before me. I still had the name from the wedding photo. Emily. It took 2 hours, a string of searches, and one quiet message through an old Facebook profile I found tucked behind privacy settings, but she replied. Her message was short. "If you're asking about Daniel Wills, I assume you've figured out he's not who he says he is. Meet me. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. by the fountain in Town Square." She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. The next morning, I told Ethan I was going for a walk to clear my head. He offered to come with me. I said no. My voice was calm, but my hands shook the entire walk to town. She was already waiting when I arrived. A petite woman in her early 30s, dark auburn hair pulled back, arms crossed. Her eyes met mine and softened with recognition. "You must be Claire." I nodded. "You're Emily." We sat on a stone bench by the fountain. Two strangers connected by one man's web of lies. "I was never his wife," she said before I could even start. "We were engaged, lived together for 4 years, planned the whole wedding. He vanished 2 weeks before the ceremony." My breath caught. "Vanished?" She nodded. "No goodbye, no note, just gone. Took his things, disconnected his number, disappeared from work. I thought he was dead for a while. And now? Now I know better," she said flatly. "He's not dead. He's just someone else." Over and over again. I showed her the photo I'd found in the locked room. She stared at it for a long time, her expression unreadable. "I thought I knew him," she whispered. "But he's good at being exactly what you want until he doesn't need to be anymore." I felt something break quietly inside me. Not a shatter, just a slow, painful crack. Emily looked at me with something close to pity. If he brought you here, it means you're next. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a lie, it was a cycle, and I had to find a way out. I came back to the house with too much silence in my throat. Ethan was gone when I returned. No note, no explanation, just the echo of a slammed door and the faint smell of his cologne lingering in the hallway. Aunt May was in the garden, trimming dead leaves off rose bushes like it was the most natural thing in the world. I watched her for a while from the kitchen window, then stepped outside. She didn't look up when I approached. "You met her," she said simply. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She clipped another rose. Emily was sweet, kind, a little too trusting, just like you. I swallowed hard. "You knew?" She finally looked at me, eyes sharp but tired. "I've known for years. I didn't know about you, not until he showed up at the door with that look in his eyes. That charming, desperate look like he was trying to rewrite the same story again." My voice was barely a whisper. "Why let him do it?" She gave a bitter laugh. "You think I have a choice? He's my nephew. His mother, my sister, left him here when he was 12, said she couldn't handle him. I raised him as best I could. But Daniel, he's always lived in a world just slightly removed from the rest of us." "A world of lies?" I asked. "A world of masks," she replied. "He doesn't know how to be real. Not fully. He plays the role until it falls apart, then runs until he finds someone new to believe in him again." My hands clenched at my sides. "And what happens to the ones who believe?" She looked down. "They leave. Or he makes them." "How many women?" I asked. She hesitated, then sighed. 4. That I know of. 4. My heart ached in ways I didn't have words for. "He always comes back here," she said. "Eventually. With a new name, a new story, a new woman. I stopped asking questions a long time ago. You should have warned me." "I tried," she whispered, "but by the time you're here, it's already too late." I turned to go, but she stopped me with one final thought. "Be careful, Claire. Daniel doesn't lose. He rewrites the ending." I didn't look back, but I finally understood. The house wasn't just full of secrets. It was a stage, and I was just the next act in a play that never stopped repeating. I started walking more alone, through town, through silence, through everything I'd once tried so hard not to see. Ethan, or Daniel, was still gone, but now I wasn't hoping he'd come back. I was just waiting to see what would surface in the space he'd left behind. Linden Creek was the kind of place where people didn't bother pretending they weren't watching. The kind of town where a stranger asking questions raised eyebrows, but a woman with tired eyes and a cracked smile, they opened up to her. Eventually. It started at the bakery. The woman behind the counter squinted at me, then at the croissant in my hand. "You're Daniel's friend, right? Haven't seen him around in a while." "Something like that," I said. "You know him?" "Everyone knows him." She leaned in slightly. "Real charmer, that one. Always comes back around with a new girl. Different name, same smile." My stomach tightened. "He's dated a lot of women?" She gave a knowing look. "Let's just say he's made the rounds. Always mysterious. Always leaving, without saying goodbye. Few broken hearts in this town with his fingerprints on them." Later, at the post office, I overheard an older man mention the Wills boy. Said he'd never kept a job for long. Always a scheme, always a story. "He's the kind who can talk his way into anything," the man said, "and vanish before you realize the check bounced." By the time I sat down at the park bench near the fountain, the one Emily had waited on, I had heard the same theme again and again. Charming, secretive, vanishes. Not a husband, not even a fiancé. Just a man who wore people the way others wore seasons. And now, it was autumn again. And I was shedding him. I stopped pretending to be confused. I stopped giving him the benefit of the doubt. Instead, I got methodical. The morning after my walk through town, I returned to the locked room. The key still worked, and this time I brought a notebook. I cataloged everything. I photographed the family documents, flipped through drawers that held old IDs, 3 of them, all with his face but different names. Daniel Wills, Ethan Gray, Nicholas Dempsey. Each with a different birth date, different address, different life. In a box tucked under a stack of tax papers, I found a second phone, burnt orange case, unlocked. Dozens of text messages from names I didn't recognize, women mostly. Some recent. One from just last week. Can't wait to see you again, D. Miss our nights. K. I scrolled further. Different tone. Another woman. You said you loved me. Where are you? Ashley. Each message felt like a blade being sharpened against bone. And then I found a photo. A selfie he'd taken in a hotel room mirror. Shirtless, smirking. Not for me. I kept going. I found a drawer of letters, some written by him, some to him, most unfinished. Apologies. Promises, some desperate, some cold. He'd kept them all like souvenirs from lives he'd stolen pieces from. In the bottom drawer was a sealed envelope with my name written in his handwriting. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I packed everything into a box. I took photos of every document, every ID, every trace. I uploaded them to a cloud folder, scheduled them to auto-send to Emily, and one to myself just in case something happened. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the truth. I was building a case. Not just for me, but for every woman he'd left behind in the ashes of his disappearing act. And when he came back, because I knew he would, I wouldn't be another story he got to rewrite. I'd be the one ending it. The truth should have felt like closure. But it didn't. Not yet. Not until I knew exactly how deep the lie went, how far Daniel, or Ethan, or whatever name he was using, had woven himself into my life. So I called a lawyer. I didn't tell Ethan. I didn't even tell Aunt May. I drove into the next town over, found a quiet law office that didn't ask too many questions, and handed over our marriage certificate like it was still supposed to mean something. The woman behind the desk took one look at it, then excused herself to make some calls. When she returned, she looked more cautious than curious. "This is unusual," she said gently, placing the document between us. "This certificate, where did you get it?" "I thought it was real," I said quietly. "We signed it. There was a courthouse, a judge." She gave a tight nod. "We checked the county database. There's no record of a marriage between you and anyone named Ethan Gray. Or Daniel Wills, for that matter." My throat dried. "It looks legitimate," she continued, tapping the signature. "But the notary stamp doesn't match any employee records. The file number doesn't exist. It's forged." I stared at the paper, stunned. It looked real. It felt real. But it was nothing more than carefully constructed fiction. "He never legally married you," she said. "I'm sorry. Sorry." What did that word even mean anymore? I left the office in a daze, clutching a truth I hadn't known to fear until now. I wasn't just a victim of lies. I was never a wife. I was a role in someone's fantasy, a placeholder in a script I didn't write. And the worst part? I hadn't even seen the end yet. He came back that evening. No warning, no apology, just the sound of gravel crunching under tires and the front door creaking open like the house itself had been holding its breath. I was sitting at the kitchen table with the envelope he'd left me days ago, still unopened. When he walked in, our eyes met, and I think he knew. Not just that I had questions, but that I had answers. He didn't speak right away, just stood there, key still in hand, shoulders sagging like he'd aged 10 years since leaving. "You went digging," he said. I didn't deny it. I found the room, the IDs, the phones. I talked to Emily. I spoke to a lawyer. He dropped his gaze. "There's no record of us being married, Ethan, or Daniel, or whoever you are." He flinched like I'd slapped him. "I loved you," I said. "And you built a life on lies." He stepped forward, voice cracking. "I didn't mean to hurt you, but you did." He dropped to his knees, right there in front of me, hands trembling. "Please, I didn't know how else to be. I never learned. I've spent my whole life running from who I am." "You're a fraud," I said, quieter now. "You planned everything. The house, the family lie, the fake wedding. Why?" He looked up at me, eyes red. "Because when I'm alone, I'm nothing. I become someone new every time I meet someone who believes in me. You made me feel real, Claire." Tears streaked down his face. I thought maybe this time would be different, that maybe I could stay. But you didn't give me a choice, I whispered. He nodded slowly, broken. Because I didn't believe you'd love the real me. Silence wrapped around us like fog. For the first time, I didn't see a charming stranger or a confident liar. I saw a scared man, a boy trapped in a grown man's body, clinging to borrowed lives because he didn't know how to survive in his own. But pity wasn't enough to rebuild the truth. I know who you are now, I said, rising to my feet. And that's exactly why I'm walking away. And for once, he didn't follow. He stayed quiet for a day after I told him I was leaving. Gave me space, acted small, like a boy sent to the corner. I almost believed he'd heard me. Almost. Then he knocked on my door the next morning with coffee and a folded blanket. His eyes were soft, sleeves rolled up like he was trying to look harmless. I can change, he said. The words floated between us like smoke. They sounded practiced, polished at the edges from overuse. I know what I've done. I know I've lied. But I want to be better for you. I didn't respond. I'll go to therapy, he said. I'll delete the other accounts. I'll tell you everything. No more secrets. It was everything I used to wish he'd say. Back when I thought we were real, but now? It felt too late. Still, something inside me hesitated. Not hope, just habit. That dangerous, familiar pull. So I told him, prove it. Right now. Give me your phone. He froze just for a second, then handed it over. Unlocked. Empty. New wallpaper, no messages, no call history. A clean slate, too clean. I reset it, he said quickly. Wiped everything, fresh start. That pit in my stomach flared. Later that day, I walked past his car in the driveway. The passenger door was slightly ajar. A careless mistake. I opened it. On the floorboard sat a purse. Not mine. I opened it with shaking hands, lipstick, gum, a receipt from a boutique in the next town. The date? Yesterday. Buried at the bottom was a phone, different model, locked screen, new wallpaper. And next to it, a necklace still in its velvet case. Another lie. Another woman. And I wasn't even gone yet. He didn't want to change. He just wanted me to stay long enough for the next act. This time, I didn't cry. I took a photo of the bag, the phone, the receipt, and closed the door gently. Let him think he'd gotten away with it again. He was about to learn what it felt like to be the one left behind. I didn't scream. I didn't pack in a rush or storm out the front door with vengeance in my chest. I went digital. I gathered every photo, every fake ID, every screenshot of messages he'd sent to other women. I compiled them into a timeline. Names, dates, aliases, locations. His pattern, his lies, his faces. Then I wrote the story. Not a rant, not a sob post. Just the facts, laid bare in a calm voice I had to fake. I started with my own experience, then Emily's, then Marissa's. I layered in the messages from other women I'd quietly messaged in the past week. 3 of them confirmed similar stories. The web was bigger than I thought. He wasn't just a liar. He was strategic, intimate with his manipulation, careful with the way he disappeared until now. I pressed post on a blog I created under his real name. Then I linked it to every social account he owned, every version of himself. I sent private messages to every friend and contact listed under his names. Aunt May, his coworkers, his old classmates, the law firm he used to intern with. Then, I did one final thing. I sent the full file, every document, every image to the local authorities. No accusations, just information. Just truth. He came home an hour later. I was sitting on the front porch. Calm. He smiled as he approached, like nothing had snapped yet. Then his phone buzzed once. Twice. 10 times in a row. He looked down. Froze. Scrolled. Stared. What did you do? I gave them the story, I said. The real one. His hands shook as he looked at me, fury warring with fear in his eyes. You ruined my life. No, I said. You ruined your own. I just turned the lights on, and then I stood, walked down the steps, and didn't look back. Behind me, the house groaned in the wind like it was finally tired of holding in the truth. He was gone by morning. I half expected it. Men like Ethan Daniel don't stay once the mask is gone. There's nothing left to perform. No applause left to earn. I woke up to silence. Not the kind that soothes, but the kind that confirms something is missing. His car was gone. So was his phone, his clothes, his wallet. The only thing he left behind was a single envelope on the kitchen table, written in his familiar handwriting. Claire. I didn't open it right away. I stared at it like it might catch fire on its own. When I finally tore it open, the paper inside was short, one paragraph, scribbled in the kind of rushed handwriting you save for when you're already halfway out the door. I know you'll hate me for a long time. Maybe forever. I never meant to hurt you. I only wanted to feel real for once. You made me feel real. That's the truth. But I can't stay. Not now. Not when everything's broken. Maybe I've always been broken. I don't know how to be anything else. D. No apology, no address. Just excuses dressed as vulnerability. I almost laughed, almost cried. But mostly, I just folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. He had always been good at exits. Polished, clean. He'd probably start a new life in another town, with another name, and another woman who didn't know what questions to ask yet. But this time, he left behind something heavier than guilt. Proof. I reported the letter to the local police, not expecting much. They took it, filed it, said they'd keep it on record. I doubt they'll find him, but maybe that's for the best. If justice wouldn't catch him, at least his shadow would. I left the house the next day. Not in a panic, not in shame, just ready. I drove 7 hours back to the town I once called home. Familiar streets, my old apartment, my favorite cafe with the chip teal mugs and the sleepy barista who still remembered my order. The first night, I stood in my childhood bedroom and cried not because I missed him, but because I'd finally stopped pretending I didn't miss me. The girl who trusted easily. The woman who wanted forever. She deserved better. So I gave her something. I started therapy 2 weeks later. Once a week. Slow steps. No big epiphanies. Just quiet acknowledgments. That I was gaslit. That I'd been preyed upon. That I was healing. I deleted the fake wedding photos from my phone. Boxed the letter. Took back my name. People messaged me after the blog post went viral. Some were kind, others cruel. A few thanked me for speaking out, for giving their own questions a voice. Emily and I still talk sometimes. A quiet, supportive thread between two women who once loved the same ghost. Some days are heavy, others feel lighter. I'm learning to sit with both. Because healing isn't about pretending the fire never burned you, it's about learning to feel the sun again without flinching. And I'm standing in the sun now, scars and all. I never imagined I'd see a courtroom tied to my own name. Not like this. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me. The air was cold, sterile. I sat at the edge of a long wooden bench while my attorney sorted through a folder full of truth photos, forged documents, text transcripts, and a copy of the letter Ethan, or Daniel, had left behind. The case was straightforward. The marriage certificate was fake. The entire marriage, a fabrication. But fraud isn't just about forged paper. It's about intent. And Daniel Wills had intended to deceive. Systematically. He wasn't in the room. Of course not. The state hadn't located him, though they'd filed an official warrant for questioning. He had disappeared cleanly, like he always did, leaving only fingerprints on broken trust. The hearing was brief. My lawyer presented everything with quiet precision. I sat silently, hands folded in my lap, as the judge skimmed through my so-called marriage like it was just another case file. Which it was. To them. But to me, it was something else. It was my freedom being handed back to me in the form of nullification papers and a thinly veiled expression of sympathy from the bench. Your marriage is hereby declared void, the judge said, and the court will recommend investigation into fraudulent intent. A pause. I hope you find peace, Miss Hartley. My name, Claire Hartley. It had been months since I'd heard it spoken like that. Not Claire Wills. Not Claire Gray. Just me. As I walked out of the courthouse, the sun hit me in the face like it had been waiting to welcome me back. I didn't smile, but I did breathe. Deeply. Because it was done. He may have vanished, but I was the one who was free. 2 months later, I moved into a small apartment with creaky floors, secondhand furniture, and the kind of kitchen that made you want to learn how to cook just to fill the silence. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I chose the curtains, the mugs, the throw pillows I never cared about before. Every item I unpacked felt like a declaration. I exist. I choose. I begin again. I changed my name back legally, took the paperwork to the DMV, signed it on the dotted line, like I was reclaiming a life that had never really left me, just been buried under someone else's performance. No more Ethan, no more Daniel, no more aliases or locked rooms. I blocked every number that wasn't family or friends, deleted every fake anniversary post, every memory that wasn't rooted in truth. I archived the blog, not out of shame, but because I didn't want it to define me forever. It had served its purpose. It had told the story. Now I was living the next one. I started volunteering at a local shelter on Tuesdays, signed up for a watercolor class. Nothing grand, nothing showy, just steps, quiet, deliberate steps toward becoming someone whole. And I stopped asking why. Why he did it. Why me? Why it took so long to see. Some questions are traps dressed as closure. But healing? Healing is making space for new questions. What do I want now? Who am I without the lies? And the answer, whispered back slowly over time, was always the same. I'm still here, and I'm not afraid anymore. It came on a Monday, the kind of day that felt normal. Light rain tapping at the windows, the scent of coffee in the air, a laundry list of small, ordinary tasks waiting to be done. Peaceful, almost. Until my phone buzzed. Unknown number, one message. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't need to open it to know who it was from. My body recognized the name before my brain did. That small knot in my stomach, the flicker of adrenaline. The ghost still had my number. I tapped it open. Claire, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. I just wanted you to know I'm getting help. For real this time. I'm in therapy. I'm sorry. I hope someday you'll forgive me. D. No demands. No manipulation. No flowers of false charm. Just an echo of a man I once thought I knew, still trying to rewrite the ending. I stared at the message for another full minute. Not because I was tempted. Not because I wanted to respond. But because I realized something. It didn't hurt. It didn't spiral me back into confusion or longing. It didn't make my hands shake or my throat tighten. It didn't make me feel small. It just felt done. I hit delete. No reply. No second read. No screenshot for memory. Just silence. And that silence felt like the final chapter closing behind me. Not slammed shut, just softly sealed. Let him get help. Let him find his own redemption or not. I wasn't the one who needed to save him anymore. The cafe was quiet, tucked between a used bookstore and a flower shop with windows fogged from the rain. I liked coming here alone. I'd sit by the window with a warm drink and let the world move around me without needing anything from me. This time, a couple sat 2 tables over. Mid-20s, still new, laughing over a shared pastry, arms brushing every so often like it was instinct. There was something soft about them unguarded. That rare look of people who hadn't learned yet what it cost to give your heart away. I didn't feel envy. I felt grace. A kind of tender understanding that only comes after you've been shattered and survived your own pieces. I sipped my tea, letting the moment stretch. And in my head, I heard my voice calm now. Not broken. I thought I lost everything. The love, the promise, the version of forever I had pictured so clearly. But I didn't lose myself. In fact, I gained the one thing I had forgotten how to hold: me. I closed my eyes for a second, just to breathe it in. No more locked rooms. No more borrowed names. No more pretending. Just me. Whole. Quiet. Awake. And finally free. This story was brutal. But this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.